Eli Turner hadn't eaten a full meal in 3 days, yet every morning he still knelt in the dust and thanked God for what little he had: an empty pan, 2 hungry children, and a faith that refused to die in the Nevada sun. The desert around Eureka had a way of testing a man's soul. The wind carried more dust than hope, and the gold that once drew dreamers from across the country had long since vanished into the hands of luckier men. But Eli stayed, not because he was stubborn, but because he believed that where faith stood firm, miracles still found room to breathe. He lived with his wife Grace and their 2 children, Maggie and Luke, in a dented silver trailer parked at the edge of a dying town. The paint had peeled to the color of ash, and the generator coughed through the cold nights like an old smoker. Still, every morning, Eli rose before dawn, bowed his head, and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for another day, for breath, for purpose, for the chance to keep believing." Grace often watched him in silence, her tired hands cradling a chipped mug of coffee. She didn't understand how he did it, how a man could stare at an empty table and still see abundance. But Eli's faith was his oxygen. He didn't pray because life was easy. He prayed because it wasn't. When the sun cracked the horizon, he loaded his worn tools into the truck and drove toward the riverbed, a place that looked more like a scar than a source of life. There, among rusted pans and forgotten dreams, he worked beside men who had already surrendered to despair. Most of them cursed the dust, the drought, and the God they claimed had abandoned Nevada. Eli, however, never cursed. He sifted, he waited, and he smiled. Among those men was Damian Cole, a local gold dealer with clean boots and a mean laugh. Damian no longer dug for gold. He bought what others found, then sold it for profit. He liked to mock those who still believed the desert had anything left to give. One morning, he strolled past Eli's spot with his usual smirk. "Morning, preacher. Pray hard enough today, and maybe God'll drop you a nugget the size of that trailer of yours." Eli only smiled, the sun catching the lines of his weathered face. "God's timing is perfect, Damian. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but perfect all the same." The other men laughed. Damian spat into the dirt and walked away. By the time the sky burned orange, Eli's hands were raw, his body aching. He returned home with nothing but sand and silence in his pan. The children were asleep, their small bodies curled beneath thin blankets. Grace sat at the table, an unopened bill resting beneath her fingertips. "Another one?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Electric company this time." He laid his calloused hand over hers. "We'll make it work. We always do." But that night, Eli couldn't sleep. The desert wind moaned through the cracks in the trailer, carrying his doubts with it. He stepped outside, knelt in the dust, and whispered to the heavens, "Lord, I'm not asking for riches, just mercy, a sign that you still see us." In that silence, something stirred, not a voice, but a knowing, deep and quiet. "Go to the park tomorrow, feed the birds, pray there." He didn't understand it, but peace settled in his chest, and for a man like Eli, peace was enough to obey. The next morning came pale and cold. Grace watched as Eli packed his small lunch, 2 sandwiches, a thermos of coffee, and an apple for the kids. "You're not heading to the river?" she asked. "Not today," he said, with a faint smile. "Got a different kind of work to do." She said nothing more. She had seen that look before, the stillness in his eyes, like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. Eli drove into town. The roads were empty except for tumbleweeds and broken dreams. He stopped at the old Eureka Park, a forgotten patch of grass where pigeons outnumbered people. He sat on a worn bench, opened the bag, and began to scatter crumbs. The pigeons gathered quickly, fluttering, cooing, filling the silence with life.
As he watched them feed, his heart softened. "Thank you, Lord," he murmured, "for letting me feed something, even if it isn't myself." Then he noticed a man sitting near the path, thin, gray-bearded, his eyes hollow. His jacket was an old army coat, torn at the sleeves. He was trying to open a dented can of beans with shaking hands. Eli approached. "You all right, sir?" The man gave a nervous laugh. "Ain't eaten since yesterday. Bus broke down, been walking since sunrise." Without hesitation, Eli handed him his lunch bag. "Here, sandwiches and coffee. It's not much, but it's yours." The veteran blinked. "You sure?" Eli smiled gently. "I've got everything I need." The old man's lips trembled. "God bless you." "He already has," Eli said. When the man began to eat, Eli turned back to the pigeons. Something inside him loosened, a quiet, wordless joy. He prayed there until the sun climbed high, and when he rose to leave, the veteran was gone. Only the echo of peace remained. That afternoon, Eli returned to the river. Damien was there, leaning against his truck, flipping a coin. "Well, look who decided to show up," Damien called. "You done praying for gold?" Eli smiled faintly, something like that. He began to sift the gravel, his rhythm steady, his focus calm. Hours passed. Sweat darkened his shirt. The desert wind howled. Then his pan struck something heavy. He reached into the water and pulled out a stone the size of his fist, and beneath it, something glimmered. He brushed away the mud and froze. A gold nugget, pure, massive, radiant. His knees gave out. Tears welled in his eyes. He whispered, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you." The others gathered, gasping. Even Damien fell silent. Eli stood there in the fading light, gold cradled in his hands, trembling not from greed, but from awe. That night, he placed the nugget on the kitchen table. Grace's breath caught when she saw it. "It's real?" she whispered. He nodded, voice shaking. "We're going to be okay." But deep inside, Eli knew something greater had happened. The gold wasn't the miracle, obedience was. The blessing had been waiting all along, he just had to listen.
News of Eli's discovery spread faster than a desert storm. For weeks, people stopped him on the street, asked to touch the nugget, to hear the story. Newspapers called him the man who found faith and fortune. But Eli didn't see it that way. He knew the fortune wasn't found in the river. It was found the morning he gave away his lunch. He sold the nugget in Reno through a fair dealer, refusing Damien's offers. The money was enough to buy a small house, pay off every debt, and secure a better life for his children. When they moved in, Grace broke down in tears. "I prayed for years, Eli. I thought maybe he'd stop listening." He pulled her close. He never stopped. Sometimes he just waits until we're ready to listen back. With the extra money, Eli repaired the church roof, bought food for the veterans' shelter, and quietly paid the hospital bills of 2 miners who couldn't work anymore. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't want thanks. Whenever someone tried, he simply said, "God's timing." Meanwhile, Damien's luck ran dry. His greed had caught up with him. Debts, lawsuits, broken deals. One night, drunk and bitter, he showed up at Eli's door. "You think you're better than me?" he slurred. "You got lucky, that's all. Your God didn't do that. Chance did." Eli met his gaze calmly. Maybe, or maybe, chance is just what faith looks like to those who don't believe.
Damien stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked into the night, the sound of his boots fading into the dark. Years passed. Grace opened a small bakery. Maggie learned the piano. Luke said he wanted to be a man who listens when God whispers. One morning, Eli drove back to the park. The same pigeons fluttered around the same old bench. He sat, fed them again, and whispered, "Thank you for trusting me with little before you gave me much." A voice behind him said, "Mind if I sit?" It was the old veteran, healthy, clean, wearing new clothes. "I heard about you," the man said. "Didn't realize it was you who fed me that day. I got back on my feet since then. Been volunteering at the shelter." Eli smiled, his throat tight. "I'm glad." The man looked toward the pigeons. "Funny how one small kindness can change everything." Eli nodded. "That's how heaven works. One act, one prayer, one breath at a time." As the sun broke over the town, Eli stood, hands in his pockets, heart at peace. "Still praying for gold?" the man asked. Eli smiled. "No, I already found it."